You know, have you ever wondered what happens when a belief system, something people have held on to for centuries, suddenly gets put under the microscope? When it finds itself in the crosshairs of a whole new way of thinking? Well, that's exactly the story we're going to get into today. It's this fascinating, long story of defending faith in a world that started demanding proof for everything. All right, let's dive right in. So, this is really the big question, right? What happens when faith meets a skeptical world? You've got these systems built on, revelation and tradition, and suddenly they're clashing head on with an age of reason and science. It forces this really deep and honestly often pretty difficult conversation. And the response to that clash, well, that's a whole field of study called apologetics. Okay, so what is Christian apologetics exactly? Well, at its heart, it's a branch of Christian theology that's all about defending the faith against objections. And the name itself gives us a huge clue. It comes from this Greek word apologia. Now, this isn't an apology like, oops, I'm sorry. No. An apologia was a formal legal defense. Think of a lawyer in a courtroom making their case. And that right there is the perfect way to think about it. The mission of apologetics is to make a compelling case for faith, just like a lawyer for their client. Right, a new age of risen, the Enlightenment challenge. So, to really get why this kind of legal defense for faith became so absolutely crucial, we have to jump back in time. We're going to a period that honestly changed everything, the Enlightenment. This was the moment the very ground started to shift right under the feet of traditional belief. So we're talking about the Enlightenment, roughly 1650 to 1800. And what's so wild about this period is the fundamental shift it represents. It's like human reason and the evidence you could see with your own eyes, they were suddenly put on the throne. Before this, divine revelation was, a primary source of authority. But now, thinkers weren't just picking at specific church doctrines anymore. They were questioning the whole shebang, the very idea of Christianity and revelation itself. And I want to be clear, this wasn't some quiet debate happening in a dusty library. No way. For the first time, on a massive scale, Christianity itself was put on the defensive. The entire Christian worldview was suddenly on its back foot. This meant the job of an apologist, which used to be pretty straightforward, just got a whole lot more complicated. So, faith on the defensive, an explosion of skepticism. But why? Why did this period become such a hotbed for skepticism? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was more like a perfect storm of different factors that came together to create this widespread crisis of faith. Let's break down exactly what those catalysts were. Okay, so there were really three big catalysts for all this skepticism. First up, the old proofs for Christianity. They just weren't holding up against really motivated skeptics anymore. Second, you have to remember, people had just lived through centuries of brutal wars of religion. A lot of folks were just plain exhausted and had zero tolerance for religious fervor. And third, and this one is huge, with the Bible now being translated for everyone to read, you suddenly had countless people interpreting it for themselves. And that led to, you guessed it, a massive explosion of new and conflicting ideas. Two thinkers, two paths. How should faith respond? So with faith basically backed into a corner, how did Christian thinkers fight back? Well, there wasn't just one strategy. Instead, the whole movement kind of split into two very different and often competing schools of thought.
So you have these two competing solutions. On one hand, you've got the revisionists, guys like Friedrich Schleiermacher. His goal was basically to build a bridge, to make faith compatible with modern thinking. But on the other hand, you had the radicals, like Soren Kierkegaard. He said, nope, and rejected any attempt to make faith seem reasonable at all.
Schleiermacher's whole take was basically, hey, let's meet these skeptics where they are. He argued that a lot of traditional Christian doctrines, things like miracles or prophecy, could be reinterpreted so they didn't, offend modern sensibilities. His goal was to remove the stumbling blocks for intellectuals to show that faith could still be relevant by making it a bit more palatable to a modern, rational mind. And then there's Kierkegaard. He went in the complete opposite direction. He believed that if you make faith easy or logical, you actually strip it of its power. For him, faith demanded a passionate, personal commitment. It required a leap. He literally argued that if you could prove Christianity with logic, it wouldn't be faith anymore. I mean, think about that. His intention, in his own words, was to make it more difficult to become a Christian, not less. What is the Bible? A question of authority. So you can see this debate wasn't just some abstract philosophical argument. It forced people to ask some really fundamental questions. Like, if you're going to defend Christianity, what exactly are you defending? And that question leads us straight to the very foundation of Christian authority. the Bible itself. So let me ask you a quick question. How many books are in the Bible? Go on, take a guess. If you said 66 or maybe 73 for the Catholic Bible, you're not wrong, but you're not entirely right either, because for one of the world's oldest Christian communities, the answer is 81. And this really shows you the problem of authority perfectly. Just look at this comparison. Most folks in the West are familiar with the 66-book Protestant canon, pretty standard. But then look over at the broader canon from the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. It has a whopping 81 books, and it includes texts that many people have never even heard of, like the Book of Enoch or the Book of Jubilees. And this isn't some new thing either. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church believes their 81-book Bible is one of the oldest and most complete canons out there. They hold that this specific list was established by the apostles themselves. It's just a really powerful reminder that even a question as basic as, what is the Bible? Well, it doesn't have one simple universal answer. Defending the core, an unending dialogue. So, as you can see, from these high-level philosophical debates about what faith even is, all the way down to fundamental questions about what books are in the Bible, the story of apologetics is this constant process of adaptation, of argument, and of defense. And maybe the biggest takeaway from all of this is that this isn't just ancient history. It's a living, breathing conversation. The struggle to reconcile ancient beliefs with modern thought is a dialogue that's still going on, right now, today. It forces faith to constantly re-explain and defend its place in the world, generation after generation. Which really leaves us with one last question to chew on. In a world that's changing faster than ever, with new challenges and new ideas popping up all the time, how do ancient traditions prove they're still relevant? What does that legal defense, that apologia for belief, even look like today?